Right. So, you know how you guys send us stuff and we dig into it.
Yeah,
Well, someone sent us this book by Sophia Dembling called The Introvert's Way. It's all about, living a quiet life in like a really loud world. Thought it'd be super interesting to dive into this one and see what she's got to say.
introverts unite, quietly, of course.
Exactly. Separately, in our own little corners.
Yeah,
But seriously, there's so many misconceptions, right? Like about what it actually means to be an introvert these days.
totally. And I think Dembling does a really good job at getting to the heart of it. Like,
Yeah.
she looks at how introverts can actually thrive in a world, well, a world that's, like you said, kind of set up for extroverts.
Yeah, it often feels that way, doesn't it?
Right.
So in this deep dive, we're going to try to bust some of those myths and give you guys some practical takeaways, like how can you be your best introverted self?
That's the goal.
So maybe to start, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What are we even talking about when we say introvert?
Yeah, good point. At its core, introversion really boils down to energy.
Okay.
Introverts recharge by spending time alone or in low stimulation environments.
Mm.
Whereas extroverts kind of get that boost from being around other people.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to clarify that introversion isn't the same thing as being shy or socially anxious, although, there can be overlaps sometimes.
Right. You can be a shy extrovert.
Totally. It's about where you get your energy from and where you spend it, essentially.
Makes sense. And it's interesting because, like we were saying before, so much of our society seems to be geared towards extroversion, like being the life of the party, always networking, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And Dembling actually talks about this quite a bit, like how there's this pressure on introverts to sort of, perform extroversion. And she really challenges that, saying that it's not only unnecessary, but can also be kind of harmful.
Right. Like, why do we have to pretend to be something we're not?
Exactly. It's about embracing those natural tendencies rather than trying to, change them.
Yeah, and I think one of the big differences in those tendencies, between introverts and extroverts is how they approach relationships, right?
Definitely.
Introverts, from what I've read and, from my own experience, we tend to go for depth over breadth, Like, I'd much rather have a few really meaningful connections than, like, a huge network of acquaintances.
That makes sense.
And I think Dembling touches on that, too. It's about quality over quantity when it comes to social interaction.
Yeah, she talks about how introverts often find small talk super draining, right?
Mhm.
So they tend to gravitate towards deeper, more substantial conversation.
Totally.
And, this doesn't mean introverts are antisocial or anything.
Right.
It's just that they're more selective about how and with whom they spend their social energy.
And that selectivity applies to so many other things, like even just deciding how to spend an evening,
Oh, for sure.
For a lot of introverts like myself, staying in and reading a book sounds way more appealing than going to a big party.
Right. And that brings us to another really important point that Dembling emphasizes, which is the power of solitude.
Yes, solitude.
Solitude is not a bad word. For introverts, it's essential. It's about having that space and time to recharge, reflect, and just process everything that's going on. It's not about being lonely. It's about giving yourself the mental space you need.
Yeah, it's almost like hitting the reset button, So you can come back feeling refreshed and ready to engage.
Exactly. And I think that leads us nicely to another crucial aspect that Dembling covers, which is the importance of setting boundaries.
Oh, yeah. Boundaries are so important, especially for introverts.
Right. It's about knowing your limits and being okay with saying no to things that might drain your energy. Like, if you know a big social event is going to wipe you out for days, it's perfectly fine to politely decline.
You don't have to please everyone all the time.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah.
It's about prioritizing your own well-being. And that's something that I think everyone, regardless of where they fall on the extroversion spectrum, can benefit from.
Totally agree. It's all about self-awareness, knowing what you need to function at your best. And I think it's also important to remember that introversion comes with a lot of strengths.
Absolutely. Like, think about it. Introverts tend to be great listeners. They're often very empathetic, and they're really good at focusing and concentrating.
Yeah, they're the deep thinkers, the ones who really delve into ideas.
And, throughout history, many of the most influential thinkers, writers, artists, and innovators have been introverts. So, it's definitely not a weakness.
Right, it's just a different way of being in the world.
Exactly. And Dembling makes a good point about how introverts can actually thrive socially, but it's about doing it on their own terms.
Yeah, like finding environments and types of interactions that work for them.
Right. Maybe it's one-on-one conversations, small gatherings, or joining groups that align with their interests. It's about making conscious choices that support their energy levels.
Yeah, and not feeling like you have to conform to some external idea of what socializing should look like.
Exactly. It's about being authentic.
Authenticity. Yeah, I love that. So basically, what we're learning from Dembling is that introversion is not something to be fixed or overcome. It's a perfectly valid and valuable way of being.
Absolutely. And understanding that can lead to so much more self-acceptance and ultimately a more fulfilling life.
Right. It's about playing to your strengths and recognizing that everyone recharges differently. So, yeah, I guess the final takeaway here for everyone listening is to think about what works for you.
Yeah. What energizes you? What drains you? And how can you create a life that honors those needs, regardless of whether you identify as an introvert or an extrovert or somewhere in between?
That's a good question. And maybe something else to think about is, are there ways that our society, maybe without even realizing it, undervalues the contributions of those quieter voices?
That's a really good question. I think that's something we should all be asking ourselves.
Food for thought. All right, everyone, that's it for our deep dive on the introvert's way. Hopefully, you guys found it insightful.
See you next time.